John Bolton. John Bolton, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News.
Glad to be with you.
You have heard the statements coming out of Washington, London, Berlin, Paris, from all of Israel's allies around the world, describing what happened in the early hours of Sunday morning here in Israel as a success for Israel. That, as Israel has told the world, 99% of those drones and missiles were shot down. Would you say Israel's deterrence failed? Why do you say that?
Well, when somebody shoots that many ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones at you, that is an indication deterrence has failed. To say that you've got to win simply because nobody has died is shameful. It encourages belligerent, aggressive dictatorships like Iran to strike again. And by the way, there's a very important piece of news in the Wall Street Journal, citing official U.S. sources, that approximately 50% of the ballistic missiles that Iran launched either failed at launch or crashed before they got far enough for us to shoot them down. And the U.S., U.K., and Israel, I think, concur there were about 120 ballistic missiles that were shot down, meaning that Iran actually launched 240. So the number of total projectiles is not 320 plus or minus, it's 440 plus or minus. And I'd like to hear from one politician from the United States, from Britain, from Germany, from any source you want, that would say, yes, well, you know, if the United States had been targeted by 440 projectiles, we would exercise restraint. We wouldn't respond. You know, we all know what leaders in Britain and the United States would do. And to call on Israel not to act in further self-defense, I think is reprehensible.
But as you know, there's a great deal of peril in this moment. Iran making it clear that if Israel does retaliate, that Iran will retaliate as well with even greater force, and the region will hurtle toward a very, very perilous escalatory spiral. And I think you'd understand why this is ringing alarm bells across the region and across the world.
Well, I have several things to say about that. First, there are costs in not responding too. And to come back to my analogy about what would happen if the United States were attacked, what if after Pearl Harbor, people had said to us, now exercise restraint, we don't want a wider war in the Pacific, do this slowly and calmly. It just isn't going to happen. And let's talk about what really threatens not just Israel, but the Gulf Arab states and the whole world, and that's Iran's nuclear weapons program. We know that on Saturday night, Israeli authorities warned their citizens in a number of locations to take precautions near military bases in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and also at Dimona, which is where Israel's nuclear reactor is. And although they don't acknowledge a nuclear weapons program, that's an important site. Now, if the Iranians targeted Dimona and nobody said anything about it, I find that very significant.
You really are getting into nightmare scenarios. As you know, John Bolton, you've long been described as, and you probably describe yourself as a foreign policy hawk. You've long called for regime change in Iran. That has not been a view that's been widely shared in the United States and in most Western capitals, even though they have their differences and deep concerns about Iran. Would you say that the kind of views you're espousing today are also minority views?
Well, I don't think there are minority views in the Republican Party. And frankly, I think support for Israel in America is much higher than it is in the United Kingdom, Germany, or most countries in Europe. The point here is that Israel has been under attack from Iran since October the 7th, not directly until Saturday night, but through Iran's terrorist proxies, Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Iraqi and Syrian Shia militia groups.
But Israel has also it's not been a one-way street, as you know. This has been a shadow war with two sides.
Yeah, there was a shadow war, indeed, in the aftermath of Hitler's attack on Poland on September 1, 1939. There was a frozen conflict in Western Europe. Who is to blame? Who's the aggressor here? It's Iran. It's Iran that has armed, equipped, trained, and financed Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and the Shia militia groups. It's Iran that has launched a ring of fire strategy around Israel. It's Iran that wants hegemony within the Islamic world. So there isn't any doubt who the culprit is here.
John Bolton, I wish we had more time, but it's good to have you on the programme to hear your views on this, not just a crisis between Israel and Iran, but it is truly a regional and global crisis, and hence the world is watching. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. And Matthew, that's